November 20, 1943. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll, Central Pacific. The tide is wrong. Corporal James, Red Harlow of the United States Marine Corps grips the edge of the landing craft as it grinds to a halt far short of the beach. The engine coughs, then idles uselessly. Around him, the metallic clatter of gear mixes with the rising crack of rifle fire. Why are we stopping? Someone shouts. No one answers. Ahead lies BDO, flat, narrow, and bristling with palm stumps and concrete bunkers. Smoke already curls into the morning sky. But between Harlow and the shore stretches a shallow coral reef, exposed by the low tide. The Higgins boats can go no further. Over the side, the coxswain yells. "You walk from here." Harlow doesn't hesitate. He swings his rifle, an M1 Garand, over his shoulder and drops into the water. It's chest deep. The shock steals his breath. Around him, dozens of Marines plunge in, their packs dragging them down, rifles held high. The reef cuts at their boots. The water churns with movement, and then, with impact, the first machine gun burst rips across the lagoon. Men go under. The Japanese defenders, soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army, have been waiting. Their positions are dug deep into reinforced bunkers, their fields of fire perfectly aligned with the lagoon approaches. Heavy Type 92 machine guns open up, their distinctive rhythmic chatter echoing across the water. Harlow hears it before he understands it, the snapping sound of bullets skipping across the surface. Then comes the screaming, "Keep moving," a sergeant bellows, but movement is slow. Every step across the reef feels like wading through wet cement. Packs grow heavier as water seeps in. The wounded fall and are left behind. Harlow pushes forward, teeth clenched. To his left, a Marine drops his rifle and clutches his chest, eyes wide with disbelief before he disappears beneath the surface. The beach is still 50 yards away. On BDO itself, Lieutenant Nakamura Kenji peers through binoculars from inside a concrete pillbox. He watches the Americans struggle through the lagoon, exposed, disorganized. "They've stopped," one of his men says. Nakamura shakes his head. "No," he replies quietly. "They are still coming." He had studied American doctrine. He had read intelligence reports. The Americans, he was told, relied on overwhelming force, on coordination, on precision. If disrupted, if bloodied early, they would hesitate, but these men, these Marines, do not hesitate. Even as bodies float in the shallows, more keep advancing. They do not retreat. They do not regroup, they keep coming. Harlow finally reaches the edge of the beach. He throws himself forward, collapsing behind a low seawall of logs and sand. Around him, a handful of others do the same, gasping, coughing, shaking. Behind them, the lagoon is filled with motionless shapes. Ahead, the island erupts with gunfire. A Marine next to him looks back at the water, then forward again. His face is pale. "We're not supposed to survive that," he mutters. Harlow doesn't respond. He checks his rifle, ejects water from the barrel, and glances over the seawall. The Japanese bunkers are still intact. The bombardment from the fleet, hours of naval gunfire, has done far less damage than expected. The defenses are alive, coordinated, deadly. A move, comes the order again, and so they do. They climb over the seawall and run straight into hell. Inside his bunker, Nakamura lowers his binoculars slowly. He had expected panic, perhaps withdrawal. A failed landing would force the Americans to reconsider, to delay. Instead, they press forward, into fire, into death, into certainty of loss. He feels something unfamiliar stir in his chest, not fear, not yet, confusion. "Why?" one of his soldiers whispers. Nakamura does not answer, because he does not yet understand. The Americans have already taken horrific losses, and they are only just beginning. November 20, 1943. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll. The sand is hot, already soaked with seawater and blood. Corporal James Harlow barely feels it as he scrambles forward, boots slipping against the loose coral. The air is thick with smoke and the sharp, metallic crack of gunfire. Every step inland feels impossible, yet stopping feels worse. "Move! Move!" a lieutenant shouts, waving his pistol toward a shattered line of palm stumps. Harlow runs. Behind him, another burst of machine gun fire tears into the men still crossing the reef. The sound doesn't stop, it blends into a constant roar, punctuated by explosions from mortars zeroed in on the shoreline. This wasn't supposed to happen. The pre-invasion bombardment, hours of shelling by the United States Navy, was meant to crush the defenses. Battleships had pounded BDO relentlessly. Carrier aircraft had strafed and bombed every visible structure, but the bunkers remain, reinforced with logs, sand, and concrete. They have absorbed the punishment. Now they spit fire with terrifying precision. Harlow dives behind a splintered tree trunk. A Marine next to him fumbles with a grenade, hands shaking. They're all still there, the man gasps. All of them, then we take them out, Harlow snaps, though his voice lacks conviction. Ahead, a squat concrete bunker dominates the beach approach. Its firing slit flashes continuously, each burst cutting down another Marine attempting to advance. A squad leader crawls up beside Harlow, face streaked with sand and sweat. We flank it, he says. No choice. How? Someone asks. The answer comes not in words, but in action. A pair of Marines break from cover, sprinting directly toward the bunker. One carries a flamethrower, the heavy tank strapped to his back sloshing with fuel. The other provides covering fire, firing in controlled bursts. They don't make it halfway, the machine gun cuts them down. Harlow watches, frozen for a split second too long. The reality presses in, every approach is covered, every movement anticipated, and still, the orders don't change. Forward. Inside his pillbox, Lieutenant Nakamura listens as reports come in from across the defensive line. Enemy landing continues. Heavy casualties inflicted. No sign of withdrawal. He frowns. Repeat that. No withdrawal, sir. They continue to advance. Nakamura steps outside briefly, crouching low as bullets snap overhead. He scans the beach again. The lagoon is littered with wreckage and bodies, but still, more Americans are waiting ashore. It defies logic. In his training, in the doctrines shaped by earlier campaigns, the expectation was clear: an enemy suffering such losses would pause, reorganize, perhaps even abandon the assault. That is what a rational force would do. But this force does not behave rationally. They are disorganized. One of his sergeants insists. They will break. Nakamura shakes his head slowly. No, he says. They are adapting. He watches as small groups of Marines begin to move differently, hugging cover, coordinating fire, probing weak points. Despite the chaos, a pattern is forming. A dangerous one. Back on the beach, Harlow forces himself to move again. He crawls, dragging his rifle through the sand, inching toward a shallow depression that offers a slightly better angle on the bunker. Around him, Marines begin to coordinate without orders. One lays down suppressive fire while another advances a few yards. It's crude. It's desperate, but it works. Keep firing, someone yells. Harlow raises his Garand and fires toward the slit in the bunker. He doesn't expect to hit anything, but the act matters. It forces the defenders to keep their heads down, even for a moment, and in that moment, another Marine moves, closer, closer. A grenade arcs through the air, disappearing into the darkness of the firing slit. There's a pause, a heartbeat of silence, then a muffled explosion erupts from within. The machine gun falls silent. For a second, no one moves, then a cheer breaks out, ragged, disbelieving. We got it. Move up. Harlow exhales, not realizing he'd been holding his breath. The impossible has just happened. One bunker, just one, has been neutralized, but as he looks inland, the reality returns. There are dozens more, and the cost to take even one has been staggering. Still, the Marines rise again, pushing forward step by step, bunker by bunker. Inside his position, Nakamura hears the report of the destroyed pillbox. He closes his eyes briefly. They are willing to pay any price, he murmurs. This is not the enemy he expected, not an army that calculates loss and gain in the same way. This is something else entirely, and for the first time, a quiet realization begins to take hold. If the Americans will not stop, no matter the cost, then this battle will not end the way anyone on BDO had planned. Outside, the gunfire intensifies. And the Americans keep coming. November 20, 1943. Nightfall. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll, darkness does not bring silence. It brings new fear. Corporal James Harlow lies pressed into the sand behind a jagged line of debris, splintered wood, broken equipment, and bodies. The heat of the day has faded, replaced by a damp, suffocating humidity. The air smells of cordite, seawater, and something far worse. The gunfire has changed. No longer the constant roar of daylight, it now comes in bursts, sharp, sudden, unpredictable. Flares streak into the sky, bathing the battlefield in harsh white light before plunging it back into darkness. Stay awake, a voice whispers nearby. They'll come at night. Harlow nods, though no one can see him. He has heard the stories. The soldiers of the Imperial Japanese Army are known for night attacks, fast, coordinated, and ruthless. In the darkness, lines blur. Positions vanish. A man can be surrounded before he even realizes he's been found. He grips his rifle tighter. Around him, the Marines of the United States Marine Corps dig shallow foxholes into the coral sand. There is no time for anything deeper. The ground is too hard, too thin. In many places, they dig among the dead. Think they'll hit us hard? A young private asks. Harlow glances toward the interior of the island, where the Japanese defenses still hold strong. Yeah, he says quietly. They will. Across the narrow strip of BDO, Lieutenant Nakamura Kenji prepares his men. Inside a dimly lit bunker, he studies a rough map scratched into the sand. Their defensive lines have held, but not without cost. Several forward positions have been lost. The Americans have established a foothold. Unacceptable. We counterattack, Nakamura says. His officers nod. This is expected. This is doctrine. A determined night assault can break a beachhead before it solidifies. The enemy is exposed, disorganized, vulnerable. They have taken heavy losses, one officer adds. Their morale must be low. Nakamura pauses. He remembers the sight from earlier, the endless line of Marines advancing through the lagoon, cut down again and again, yet never stopping. Do not assume that, he says firmly. Still, the plan proceeds. Under cover of darkness, small units begin to assemble. Rifles are checked. Bayonets fixed. Grenades distributed. Orders are whispered, repeated, memorized. The attack will come swiftly, decisively. On the American line, the first sign is not sound, but movement. A shadow where there should be none. Movement. Someone hisses, then the night explodes. A sudden burst of rifle fire erupts from the darkness, followed by the unmistakable cry of charging men. Japanese soldiers surge forward, their silhouettes briefly illuminated by flares. Open fire. A Marine shouts. Harlow fires instinctively, the recoil of his Garand jolting through his shoulder. The muzzle flash blinds him momentarily, but he keeps firing, aiming at shapes, at movement, at anything. The battlefield dissolves into chaos. Men shout over one another. Orders are lost in the noise. Some Marines fire too quickly, emptying their clips in seconds. Others freeze, overwhelmed by the sudden violence. A Japanese soldier appears out of the darkness, barely 10 yards away. Harlow swings his rifle and fires. The figure drops, but another takes his place. Hold the line. Someone screams. Grenades detonate, sending showers of sand and debris into the air. A Marine beside Harlow cries out, clutching his leg. They're breaking through. Another voice yells, but they don't, not quite. Despite the shock, despite the exhaustion, the Marines hold. Small groups form naturally, 2 or 3 men covering each other, firing in controlled bursts. Machine guns, hastily positioned, begin to find their rhythm, cutting down attackers as they close in. The Japanese assault, fierce and determined, begins to falter. Inside the chaos, Nakamura moves forward with his men. He sees the same thing again, something he cannot ignore. The Americans do not collapse, even after the day they have endured, even after the slaughter on the reef and the beach. They fight with a stubborn, relentless cohesion. They should be broken. One of his soldiers gasps. Nakamura says nothing, because he knows now, they are not going to break. The attack loses momentum. One by one, the charging figures disappear back into the darkness, or fall where they stand. The night grows quieter again, not silent, never silent, but quieter. Harlow lowers his rifle slowly, hands trembling. His ears ring. His throat burns from smoke and salt. Is it over? The young private whispers. For now, Harlow replies that he leans back against the sand, staring up at the faint stars above. Around him, the wounded moan softly. Medics move through the darkness, doing what they can. The line has held, barely, across the island. Nakamura stands in the shadows, watching as his remaining men withdraw. The counterattack has failed, not because it lacked courage, not because it lacked planning, but because the enemy refused to yield. He exhales slowly, the weight of realization settling deeper with each passing hour. This battle will not be decided by a single blow. It will be a test of endurance. Of will, and the Americans, despite everything, despite losses that would have shattered other armies, are still here, still advancing, still fighting, still refusing to stop. November 21, 1943. Morning. Battle Island, Tarawa Atoll. The sun rises on a battlefield that barely resembles land anymore. Corporal James Harlow lifts his head slowly from the shallow scrape he calls a foxhole. His uniform is stiff with salt and sand. His eyes burn from lack of sleep. For a moment, he doesn't move, just listens. Gunfire, still there, still constant. The night had not broken them. It had only delayed what was coming next. Up, a voice nearby mutters. "We're moving again." Harlow exhales sharply. Of course they are. There is no pause. No regrouping in safety. No time to process what has already happened. The order is the same as yesterday: advance. Behind the lines, naval guns from the United States Navy open fire once more. The distant thunder rolls across the island as shells slam into suspected Japanese positions. Columns of sand and smoke erupt into the air, but this time, the Marines do not wait. They move with the bombardment. "Keep close to it," an officer shouts. "Don't let them recover." Harlow pushes himself up, legs stiff and heavy. Around him, the survivors of yesterday, fewer now, check their weapons, adjust their gear, and begin to move forward across the shattered terrain. The battlefield is tighter here. No open lagoon. No wide beach, just a maze of craters, broken palm trunks, twisted metal, and hidden death. Every step forward risks triggering a sniper's shot or drawing fire from a bunker that had seemed silent seconds before. Ahead, a reinforced Japanese position dominates a narrow strip of ground, a complex of interlocking bunkers, trenches, and firing points. It had survived the naval bombardment. Again, same problem, a sergeant mutters. Different bunker. This time, they are ready. A team moves forward, 2 riflemen, a bar gunner, and a Marine carrying a flamethrower. The weapon looks crude, almost primitive, but Harlow has already seen what it can do. They advance in short bursts. .1 fires. Another moves. The bunker answers immediately. A machine gun roars to life, its fire sweeping across the ground in front of them. Sand erupts in violent sprays. The team dives for cover. "Suppress it," the sergeant yells. Harlow joins in, firing toward the narrow slit in the bunker. The goal isn't precision, it's pressure. Every bullet forces the defenders to keep their heads down, even for a second, and seconds are everything. "Now," the sergeant shouts. The flamethrower Marine rises. For a moment, he is completely exposed, then he fires. A stream of liquid flame arcs through the air, striking the face of the bunker. Fire clings to the structure, pouring into the firing slit, spreading along its surface. Inside, something changes. The machine gun stops, not gradually, instantly. The silence is more shocking than the noise. A move. Harlow yells. They surge forward, closing the distance. Grenades follow, one, then another, thrown into the dark openings of the position. Explosions thud from within. When they reach the bunker, there is no resistance left. Harlow doesn't look inside. He doesn't need to. Across the island, Lieutenant Nakamura watches another position fall. His jaw tightens. The Americans have changed their approach. They are no longer advancing blindly into fire. They are coordinating, using covering fire, explosives, and flame with increasing efficiency. They learn quickly. One of his officers says. Nakamura nods. "Yes," he replies. Too quickly. He studies the battlefield. What unsettles him is not just their tactics, but their persistence. Even after the previous day's losses, their momentum has not slowed. If anything, it has hardened. They should have paused, the officer insists. Any army would. Nakamura turns to him, but they did not. There is no anger in his voice. Only a growing clarity, the assumptions they had relied on, the belief that inflicting enough casualties would break the enemy's will, are proving false, dangerously false. Back at the front, Harlow wipes sweat and grime from his face. His hands still tremble slightly, though he barely notices anymore. Keep moving, the lieutenant orders, always forward. They push deeper into the island, each yard gained at a cost that feels too high, and yet, somehow, not high enough to stop them. The battlefield shrinks. The Japanese positions, once dominant, are being isolated, surrounded, dismantled one by one. But resistance remains fierce. Snipers fire from hidden positions. Mortars drop shells with terrifying accuracy. Every bunker is a fight, every trench a risk. At one point, Harlow pauses behind cover and looks back, toward the beach, toward the lagoon. What he sees is enough to make him still. The water is dotted with wreckage, and with men. For a brief moment, doubt flickers. How can they keep doing this? How can anyone keep going after that? But the moment passes, because the answer is already in motion, around him, ahead of him, within him. They do not stop because stopping is not an option. The line has been drawn, and they will push it forward, no matter the cost. Across BDO, Nakamura lowers his binoculars once more. Another bunker lost, another line pushed back. He exhales slowly. This is no longer a test of firepower, he says quietly. It is a test of endurance. And the Americans, impossibly, are still advancing. November 21, 1943. Afternoon. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll. The heat is suffocating, not the kind that merely tires a man, but the kind that presses down on him, drains him, strips away everything except instinct. The sand burns through worn boots. The air hangs heavy, unmoving, thick with smoke and the stench of battle. Corporal James Harlow stumbles forward, barely aware of the weight of his gear anymore. His world has narrowed to fragments, targets, movement, orders, survival, water. Someone rasps nearby. There isn't enough. Canteens are nearly empty. Supplies are delayed, pinned back by the same reef and fire that had slaughtered the first waves. Ammunition is running low in some sectors. Units are mixed together, companies blurred into scattered groups of survivors, and still, the attack continues. Push through, an officer shouts hoarsely. They're weakening. It's hard to believe. From Harlow's perspective, the Japanese defenses feel endless. Every time one bunker falls, another opens fire from a new angle. Every advance is met with resistance just as fierce as before. Ahead, a trench line cuts across the island, a defensive spine connecting multiple positions. Smoke drifts from its edges. Movement flickers within. Grenades ready. A sergeant orders. Harlow grips one, pulling the pin with practiced motion. His hands no longer shake. Not because he's calm, but because there's no energy left for fear. They rush the trench. The world compresses into seconds. Grenades arc forward, detonations ripple along the line. Marines leap in, rifles firing at close range. The sounds are deafening, contained, immediate. It's over quickly, too quickly to process. Harlow lands inside the trench, breath ragged, rifle raised, then slowly lowers it. No movement. Clear. Someone calls out, but there is no relief, because even as this position falls, gunfire continues just beyond it, always just beyond. Across the island, Lieutenant Nakamura stands at what remains of his command position. The map he had drawn in the sand is no longer accurate. Lines have shifted. Positions have been overrun. Reports come in. Fewer now. Left sector, lost. Central trench, compromised. Enemy advancing steadily. He listens in silence. This was not supposed to happen, not like this. The plan had been simple, proven, rooted in doctrine. Inflict maximum casualties at the point of landing. Break the assault before it could establish itself. Force hesitation. Force withdrawal. Instead, the casualties came, and the assault did not stop. They have lost too many men, one surviving officer insists, voice strained. They cannot sustain this. Nakamura looks at him, really looks. They already have, he says quietly. that is the truth no one had prepared for. The Americans are not waiting for acceptable losses, they are absorbing them, continuing through them. Back at the front, Harlow pauses behind the remains of a shattered bunker. His ears ring constantly now. His throat is raw. Every muscle aches. A Marine drops beside him, breathing heavily. How much further? The man asks. Harlow shakes his head. No idea. Because there is no clear end in sight, just more resistance. More ground. More cost, and yet, something has changed. It's subtle, hard to define, but the resistance, while still fierce, feels thinner. Less coordinated. The defenders still fight with determination, but the cohesion is slipping. Keep pressure on them, a lieutenant shouts. Don't give them time. That is the KEY.NO pause.NO recovery. The Americans, battered and depleted, are denying the enemy the very thing they themselves lack, time. Across the battlefield, Nakamura watches another group of Marines advance, slowly, methodically, covering one another as they move. He had expected to see exhaustion break them. Toc hesitation creep in. Toc the moment where they stop. But that moment never comes. Instead, he sees something else, a force that has accepted the cost, and moves forward anyway. They are beyond breaking, he murmurs. It is not admiration, not quite, but it is recognition, the kind that comes too late to change the outcome. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the ruined island, the battle continues without pause. Harlow rises again, pushing forward with the others, step by step, yard by yard, through heat, through fire, through loss that would have stopped any other advance. But not this one. Because the breaking point, the moment when they should have stopped, never came, and now, it may never come at all. November 22, 1943. Early morning. Battle Island, Tarawa Atoll. The battlefield is smaller now, not in size, but in space. There is less distance between enemy and ally. Less ground left to fight over. Less room to maneuver, to breathe, to survive. Corporal James Harlow feels it the moment he lifts his head at first light. The gunfire is closer, not distant bursts across a wide front, but sharp, immediate cracks just beyond the next mound of sand, the next shattered bunker, the next broken tree. The island is compressing around them. Up, a voice says again. It always says that. Harlow doesn't question it anymore. He rises, checks his rifle, his last full clip, and moves forward with the others. Reinforcements have arrived during the night. More Marines from the United States Marine Corps have managed to cross the reef under cover of darkness, bringing ammunition, water, and fresh bodies into the fight. Tanks, light M3 Stuarts, have also made it ashore, their tracks grinding across the sand. They are not invincible, but they change things. Bring the tank up, a lieutenant shouts. Ahead, another fortified position blocks the advance, a cluster of bunkers tied together by trenches. Rifle fire alone won't be enough. The Stuart tank lurches forward, its engine roaring, its thin armor rattling under incoming fire. Bullets ping harmlessly off its surface, but heavier rounds strike with dull, worrying impacts. The turret turns. A blast erupts from its main gun. The shell slams into the bunker, sending a plume of sand and debris skyward. The structure doesn't collapse, but it weakens again. Another shot. This time, a section caves in. Go! Go! Harlow and the others surge forward behind the tank, using it as moving cover. The coordination is rough, but effective. The tank draws fire, the infantry closes in, grenades, flame, gunfire at close range. The position falls, and then they move on to the next. Across the shrinking defensive line, Lieutenant Nakamura watches the American advance with growing clarity. They have armor now, an officer reports. I can see that. Nakamura replies that he studies the movement carefully. The Americans are no longer simply pushing forward. They are combining elements. Infantry, armor, fire support. Each covers the other. Each compensates for the weaknesses of the rest. It is not perfect, but it is relentless. Our lines are collapsing inward, the officer continues. We are being compressed. Nakamura nods slowly. Yes, that is exactly what is happening. The island, once a network of strongpoints designed to channel and destroy an invading force, is becoming a trap for its defenders. there is nowhere left to fall back to. No secondary line that has not already been compromised. No space left to absorb the pressure. Back at the front, Harlow pauses only long enough to reload. His movements are automatic now. Clip in, bolt forward, eyes up. A Marine beside him gestures ahead, trench line, 50 yards. Harlow nods, same drill. They move, the pattern repeats, but faster now. More efficiently. Less hesitation, suppress, advance, destroy, move on, the cost is still there. It hasn't lessened. Men still fall, sometimes without warning, sometimes in full view. The ground is still contested, every inch hard won, but the momentum has shifted. It is subtle, but undeniable. Inside what remains of his command position, Nakamura listens as the reports become fewer and more fragmented. Units are no longer responding in coordinated fashion. Communication lines have been cut. Orders, when given, often cannot be carried out. They are closing in from multiple directions, a runner says, breathless. Nakamura looks at him steadily. How many men remain in your unit? The runner hesitates. I don't know, sir. That answer would have been unthinkable days ago. Now, it is the only honest one left. Nakamura steps outside again, crouching low as a burst of fire snaps overhead. He watches as American forces move through the wreckage, methodical, deliberate, unstoppable. He had expected them to break at the water's edge. They did not. He had expected them to falter after the first day. They did not. He had expected the night attack to drive them back. It failed. Now, he watches as they dismantle the island itself. Piece by piece, position by position. They will take BDO. One of his officers says quietly. Nakamura does not answer immediately, because he knows that part is already decided. What remains undecided is how it ends. Back on the advancing line, Harlow stops briefly, catching his breath behind the hull of the Stuart tank. He looks ahead, at the narrowing strip of land still held by the enemy. It doesn't look like much, but he knows better. Every yard left will cost something, maybe everything. Ready? The lieutenant asks. Harlow nods. There is no other answer. They move forward again, into the shrinking space, into the final resistance, into a battle that refuses to end quietly, and behind them, the path they've carved across BDO tells a story that no one there will ever forget. They kept coming. No matter what it took. November 22, 1943. Late afternoon. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll. There is almost nowhere left to go. The island has narrowed to a final strip of resistance, a jagged line of trenches, shattered bunkers, and hastily reinforced positions. Smoke hangs low over the ground, blurring the horizon into a gray, shifting wall. Corporal James Harlow crouches behind a mound of sand, breathing hard. Every inhale burns. His uniform is soaked through, his hands blackened with grime and powder. Final push, the lieutenant says, voice hoarse but steady. Harlow glances around. There are fewer of them now, not just in his squad, but everywhere. The lines have thinned. Faces he had seen yesterday are gone. Replacements have filled some gaps, but not all. Still, the formation holds. Still, the orders are clear. Ahead, the last organized defensive line of the Imperial Japanese Army waits, and it is ready. Across the battlefield, Lieutenant Nakamura stands among what remains of his command. There is no map now. No need for one. The battle has compressed into a single, final engagement. His remaining men, those who can still fight, are positioned along the last defensible ground. Ammunition is limited. Supplies are nearly gone. Communication is reduced to shouted orders and hand signals, but discipline remains, resolve remains. They will attack again, an officer says. Nakamura nods, yes. There is no illusion left. The Americans will not stop, not now. Not after everything. They have taken losses that would have destroyed any other force. The officer continues. Why do they keep advancing? Nakamura looks out across the shattered ground, at the figures moving into position, at the tanks preparing to roll forward, at the Marines adjusting their weapons with mechanical precision. Because they have decided this battle is already won, he says quietly, and in a way, they are right. Back on the American line, Harlow checks his rifle one more time. One full clip left. A few loose rounds in his pouch. It will have to be enough. On the signal, the lieutenant says, the men NODE.NO speeches.NO dramatics, just understanding that a flare rises into the sky, and the world erupts again, naval guns from the United States Navy thunder in the distance, their shells crashing into the final defensive line. Sand and debris explode upward, briefly obscuring everything, move. The Marines surge forward, this time, there is no hesitation, they have done this too many times already, they know the pattern, suppress, advance, destroy, repeat, machine guns from the Japanese line open fire, cutting through the advancing ranks. Mortars drop in rapid succession, their explosions shaking the ground, men fall, but the line does not stop, Harlow runs low, heart pounding, rifle clutched tight. A tank rumbles past him, its gun firing point blank into a bunker ahead. The explosion tears the structure apart, left flank, someone shouts that he pivots, firing toward a trench where movement flickers. His shots are controlled now, measured, deliberate. No wasted motion, around him, the assault closes in, the distance shrinks rapidly. 50 yards. 30. 10. Then, contact, the fighting becomes immediate, personal, chaotic, grenades explode in tight spaces. Rifles fire at point-blank range. Men shout, collide, struggle for control of trenches barely wide enough to stand in. Harlow drops into a trench, landing hard. He swings his rifle, firing once, twice, then moves forward, stepping over debris, over equipment, over things he refuses to look at. Keep moving, the lieutenant yells from somewhere ahead, there is no stopping here. No holding ground, only pushing forward until there is nothing left to push against. Across the line, Nakamura fights alongside his men now. There is no separation between officer and soldier. No distance left for command, only action. He fires, reloads, moves, his world reduced to the same. Immediate struggle as the enemy he faces, and in that struggle, he sees it clearly, the Americans are exhausted, they are wounded, they have lost more men than should be sustainable, and yet, they are still advancing, still pressing, still refusing to stop. It is no longer surprising. It is no longer confusing. It is simply reality. They will not turn back, one of his soldiers says. Almost in disbelief, Nakamura nods once. No, he replies. They will not. The line begins to fracture, not all at once, but in pieces. A bunker falls here. A trench is overrun there, small gaps form, and are immediately exploited. The structure of the defense, once so carefully designed, begins to unravel under the constant pressure. Back in the trench, Harlow pauses for a split second, catching his breath. His chest heaves. His ears ring. His vision blurs at the edges, but he is still moving, still fighting, still here. He looks ahead, there is less resistance now, not none, but less. The final line is breaking, and with it, the last chance to stop what began on that reef, what should have ended there, but didn't, because they kept coming, and now, there is almost nothing left to stop them. November 23, 1943. Dawn. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll, the gunfire is different now, not the sustained roar of organized resistance, but scattered, uneven bursts. Isolated shots. Short, desperate exchanges that flare and vanish just as quickly. Corporal James Harlow notices it immediately. He pauses behind what remains of a shattered bunker, listening. You hear that? A Marine beside him mutters. Harlow nods. The pattern has changed, for the first time since the landing. There are gaps in the noise, gaps in the fight. Keep moving, the lieutenant says, though his voice carries a different weight now, not urgency, but certainty. Harlow rises and steps forward. The ground ahead is a maze of destruction. Trenches partially collapsed. Bunkers torn open. Equipment scattered and broken. The island, once a fortress, now looks like something crushed under an immense weight, and yet, resistance remains. A rifle cracks from a concealed position. Harlow drops instinctively, returning fire. A brief exchange, sharp, controlled, and then silence again, clear. Someone calls, but no one relaxes, not yet. Across what remains of the defensive line, Lieutenant Nakamura moves through the wreckage of his command. There is no longer a front. No coherent line, only fragments, small groups of soldiers, cut off, isolated, fighting where they stand. A runner approaches, breathing hard. Sir, we've lost contact with the eastern positions. Nakamura studies him for a moment. How long ago? I don't know, sir. Maybe hours. Nakamura nods slowly. Time has lost meaning here. Without communication, without structure, the battle has dissolved into something else entirely, a series of individual fights, each disconnected from the last. They are everywhere now, the runner adds quietly. Nakamura looks out across the island, and he knows it's true. The Americans of the United States Marine Corps are no longer attacking a line. They are sweeping through what remains. Back on the advance, Harlow steps into a trench, empty. He moves forward cautiously, rifle raised. Another turn, another section, also empty. They're pulling back. A Marine whispers. Harlow shakes his head. No, they're gone. Not retreating, not regrouping, gone as a force. What remains are pockets, isolated resistance that can no longer influence the outcome, still dangerous, still deadly, but no longer capable of stopping the advance. A sudden burst of fire erupts from a concealed dugout ahead. A Marine drops beside Harlow, hit before he can react. Contact front. Someone shouts. Harlow dives for cover, returning fire. Others join in. Short, controlled bursts into the opening. A grenade follows. Explosion, silence. The pattern repeats, over and over, each encounter brief, violent, final. Across the island, Nakamura kneels beside a wounded soldier. The man tries to speak but cannot. Nakamura grips his shoulder for a moment, then rises. There is nothing left to organize, nothing left to command, only the end. He moves through the ruins, passing men who still fight, still hold positions out of instinct, out of discipline, out of something deeper than orders. But it changes nothing. The outcome is no longer in doubt. He stops and looks out across BDO one last time. Smoke drifts across the shattered landscape. The sound of American movement, boots on sand, shouted orders, engines, fills the air between the fading gunfire. They never stopped, he says quietly, not to anyone in particular, just acknowledging it. Back on the advancing line, Harlow lowers his rifle slightly. There are fewer targets now, fewer shots fired in return. He feels something unfamiliar creeping in, not relief, not yet. Something closer to disbelief. After everything, after the reef, the beach, the night attacks, the endless push forward. It's ending. A Marine beside him exhales deeply. Is this it? He asks. Harlow looks ahead, at the last fragments of resistance, at the broken island, at the path carved through it by sheer persistence. Yeah, he says quietly, I think it is. But even as he says it, a distant shot cracks across the battlefield. A reminder. It's not over until it's over, and here, on BDO, even the end comes hard. November 23, 1943. Late afternoon. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll. The silence feels unnatural. Corporal James Harlow stands still, rifle lowered, listening to something he hasn't heard since the landing began. Nothing. No machine guns. No mortars. No shouted commands cutting through chaos, just the low crackle of smoldering debris, and the distant sound of waves breaking gently against the reef. It takes time for it to sink in. A Marine nearby removes his helmet slowly, running a trembling hand through sweat-matted hair. It's over, he asks, almost afraid of the answer. No one responds immediately, because after everything, after 3 days of relentless noise and violence, silence doesn't feel like victory. It feels like something missing. Harlow exhales slowly, scanning the horizon one last time. The island is still. The last scattered shots have faded into nothing. It's over, he says quietly. Around him, the Marines of the United States Marine Corps begin to lower their weapons. Some sit where they stand. Others simply stare, as if waiting for the noise to return, but it doesn't. Across BDO, the battle has ended, not with a single decisive moment, but with a gradual fading, as resistance collapsed piece by piece until there was nothing left to fight. Harlow begins to walk, not forward, not toward another objective, just walking. The ground beneath his boots tells the story. Burned out bunkers, collapsed trenches, scattered equipment, and everywhere, the cost. He stops near the edge of what had once been the main defensive line. A Marine kneels nearby, head bowed, not in prayer, just in stillness. Another lights a cigarette with shaking hands. No one celebrates. There is no cheering, only exhaustion, and something heavier. Across the island, Lieutenant Nakamura sits among the ruins of a position that no longer exists. His rifle rests beside him. Around him, there are no more organized units. No commands left to give. No line left to hold, only the aftermath. He looks out over the battlefield, the same ground he had watched through binoculars just days ago, when the Americans first appeared on the reef. He remembers what he had expected, heavy losses would stop them. It had always worked that way, but not this time. They kept coming, he murmurs, the words carry no bitterness, only understanding. Back near the shoreline, Harlow reaches the edge of the lagoon. The tide has shifted now, the reef that had trapped them on the first day lies partially submerged again, as if trying to hide what happened there, but it cannot. Wreckage still floats in the water, and beneath the surface, he doesn't look long that he can't. A voice calls out behind him, medical team. Over here. The work isn't done, not even close. The wounded still need care. The dead must be gathered. The island, won at such cost, must now be secured, organized, understood. Victory does not end the effort. It changes it. Harlow turns away from the water and walks back toward the interior, toward the others, toward what comes next, but something stays with him. A question, not about the enemy, not about the battle, but about what it took to keep moving forward when everything said to stop. Across BDO, the silence holds, the guns are quiet, the battle is over, but its meaning, what it revealed about endurance, about expectation, about the limits of human will, lingers in every corner of the shattered island, and for those who survived, it will not fade, because they remember the reef, the fire, the night, the moment when stopping would have made sense, but never happened. November 24, 1943. BDO Island, Tarawa Atoll. The island is quieter now, but not at rest. Corporal James Harlow moves slowly along what used to be a defensive trench, now half filled with sand and debris. The battle is over, but the work continues. Everywhere he looks, Marines are clearing positions, carrying wounded, marking the fallen. The smell still hangs in the air. It will for a long time. A bulldozer from the United States Navy rumbles in the distance, pushing sand over wreckage, beginning the grim process of reshaping the battlefield into something livable again. Harlow pauses near a collapsed bunker. 3 days. That's all it took. 3 days to turn a fortified island into ruins. 3 days to rewrite expectations that had guided both sides into this fight. A Marine officer stands nearby, speaking to a small group, his voice steady, but quieter than before. We hold here, he says. More operations are coming. This is just one step. Harlow hears the words, but they feel distant, because this place, this moment, feels like something more than just a step. It feels like a turning point. Across the island, among the remnants of what had been a command post, Lieutenant Nakamura sits in stillness. There are no more reports. And no more decisions to make, only reflection. He looks out over the shattered remains of BDO, the same ground where, days earlier, he had watched the Americans struggle across the reef under devastating fire. They should have stopped there. Everything in his training, everything in his experience, had told him that no force could endure that kind of loss and continue, but they did, and not just for a moment. They sustained it, they adapted, they overcame. They did not think as we expected, he says quietly to himself. That is the lesson, not just of this battle, but of what lies ahead. Because if the Americans are willing to absorb such losses and still advance, if their doctrine allows for it, demands it, then every future defense built on the assumption of breaking their will is flawed, fatally flawed. Back near the shoreline, Harlow stands with a group of Marines looking out over the lagoon. The water is calmer now, deceptively calm. Hard to believe we came through that, one of them says. Harlow nods, yeah. Another Marine kicks at the sand. They thought we'd stop, didn't they? Harlow doesn't answer immediately. He looks out at the reef, at the place where it all began, then he shakes his head. Doesn't matter what they thought, he says, we didn't. That is the truth of it, simple, brutal, unavoidable. Across BDO, the cost is being counted, though it will never fully be understood by those who were not here. The numbers will be written down, analyzed, studied, but numbers cannot capture what happened on that reef, or why it didn't stop the advance. The battle has ended, but its impact is just beginning. Commanders will study Tarawa. They will adjust tactics, improve coordination, rethink amphibious assaults. They will learn how to reduce the cost, how to make the next landing more effective, but one lesson will stand above the rest. The assumption that high casualties will force an American withdrawal is no longer reliable. On BDO, that assumption died, and in its place, something far more dangerous emerged, an understanding that this war, at least in the Pacific, will not be decided by who can inflict the most loss alone, but by who can endure it. Harlow turns away from the water and begins walking again, back across the island that cost so much to take. Behind him, the tide continues to rise, slowly covering the reef, erasing the path they crossed, but not the memory, not the lesson, because on this small strip of land in the vast Pacific, something fundamental changed. The Japanese defenders had believed that no force could keep advancing after such horrific losses. They were wrong, and the Americans proved it. Step by step, yard by yard. No matter the cost.